Right, I would like to just share with you further, a little bit further on about the meetings with Jesus. And the meeting that we have today with Jesus is a life-changing experience for that person. But it's more than a life-changing experience. You almost say it was a life-giving experience. You know, sometimes our experiences with someone or some situation is great, it changes us. But it's not often that we can say the meeting was life-giving. Um, the miracle that Jesus did by healing the man born blind that we spoke about last week was done in Jerusalem. Jesus was in Jerusalem and walking about. He saw this man born blind. But he moved on from Jerusalem, and John tells us in John 10 tells us where Jesus moved on. It says that. Can you put that on there? Is it there? When Jesus went back across, he went back across the Jordan. So he was in Jerusalem. And he left Jerusalem and went back across the Jordan. So it's quite some distance from Jerusalem. It's more than would take about 80, 90 kilometers from Jerusalem to the other side of the Jordan, to the place where John had been baptizing in the early days. There he stayed, and many people came to him. They said, though John never performed a sign, all that John said about this man was true. And in that place, many people believed in Jesus. So this is a place where Jesus started ministering, and he was quite effective in ministry, not because only about the miracles that he did, but because of John's testimony about Jesus in that area. So people, first of all, heard John speaking about Jesus, and when Jesus then came and he did many miracles, they said, now we do believe. We truly believe in you. So this is a place where the Bible says, and many people believed in him. So during the time ministering, he received the message that, and during the time when he was ministering here, he received the message that the brother of two women that Jesus knew very well, Martha and Maria, that he was sick. And they asked Jesus to come. His name was Lazarus. They asked Jesus to come to them. John 11 says that, verse 4, we read Jesus immediately told the disciples after he got this message, he said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. So Jesus already knew what was the purpose of this whole situation. Not the purpose of the sickness, but the purpose what this will end out become. He said, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. The Bible tells us that after he received the news, he still stayed where he was for 2 days more. He didn't go back to Jerusalem, or at least to Bethany, which is about 8 kilometers from Jerusalem. It's not far from Jerusalem. He didn't go back to Bethany where Martha and Maria was, but he still stayed for 2 days. And within those 2 days, before that even, in those 2 days, actually Lazarus died. And so they called him. He decided to stay for 2 more days. And in that time, actually Lazarus passed away. So up to this point, the disciples did not know that Lazarus was dead. Maybe, I don't think they did know, but it was dead. But Jesus, being all-knowing, already knew it, so he told them, Lazarus is dead. He had to tell them physically. But he also told them that he is going back to Jerusalem, basically 8 kilometers from Jerusalem, where Lazarus was. And the disciples did not fully understand what Jesus was trying to, or his intentions, because they were more concerned about his safety. He said he's going back, but they didn't really want him to go back, for him to go back, because not long ago people wanted to stone him in that specific city. So they didn't really want him to go back. But let's read from John chapter 11 further on, see what really happened in there. It's quite a passage, but just leave it on. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. This guy hasn't only died, but he's now in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Maria to comfort them in the loss of their brother. So it was close to Jerusalem. Many Jews who knew Martha and Maria, because Martha and Maria was already disciples of Jesus for quite some time. They were among the disciples. Many Jews came to them and comforted them in their loss. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Let's just read up to that point, and we can actually, after this, read further. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and he's asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up and quickly went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Martha in the house, comforting Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went away, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "How could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man have kept this man from dying?" All right, let's read up to that point. See, from a human point of view, if we look at the first reactions of both Martha and Marie, you could say this is pretty logical, their reaction. But you could also say, from their reaction, it's almost, you could see that they felt that Jesus was too late. Both Martha and Maria told him exactly that. So Martha first said to Jesus, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." A little bit later, Mary also told him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." So it almost seems like, I won't say it's direct accusations, but you can feel their hurt, their pain, their frustration, kind of like, couldn't you have come earlier? If you had been here, you would not have died. Both of them exactly told him. And the people themselves weren't very positive either. If you look at the people, what they said, people said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man keep this man from dying?" So this is like the whole group of people there kind of had the same idea that if Jesus might have just come a little bit earlier, maybe he could have kept this man from dying. See, I would say that the emotions all around in that whole group there was really one of total despair and sadness. And the Bible tells us, as a matter of fact, Jesus himself, being in human form, also wept when he's confronted with the heaviness of this whole situation. I mean, people in sadness, people 4 days in the grave. I mean, that's a long time. Remember, Lazarus, like I said, was in the grave now already for 4 days, buried. And all that Martha and Maria and the people were thinking is, it is too late. And with this, they came also the accusations at Jesus. Look, like he's kind of responsible. If he just could have been here a little bit earlier, maybe it wouldn't have happened. In my many years of ministry, I won't say that many years, but in the time that I've been ministering, I've actually heard many people who have felt the same as in our biblical passage today. Sadly, I often find people are without hope and without change. I've met people living on the street who have lost everything. I've met people who have lost their jobs, who cannot find new jobs. As a matter of fact, this week, I spoke to 2 middle-aged men, about my age, a little bit older, 153 and 151, and both of them told me they cannot find work. And they sounded very distraughted, without hope. 51-something, and we live to 70-something nowadays. So imagine these men being in their early 50s, cannot find jobs, and now they're wondering how are they going to feed themselves, they're going to feed their wives in the future when they get older even. They cannot find work now. Others that I've met went through massive financial loss, and more others even lost family members. Not long ago, as a matter of fact, I met a man from Africa, in Odessa. He's also from the French part of Africa. He speaks French. He does not, unfortunately, does not speak English very well, but he does speak French and Russian pretty well. And he's lost everything. He's lost his passport. He's lost his work. He's lost everything. And been keeping in contact with him now for the last 3 months. And I've met him. I've met him a couple of times, and I've invited him to our services, but unfortunately, he has not come yet to our services yet. But it's a man he's 41 years old, as a matter of fact, and he's lost everything. And looking to his eyes when I met him, I can almost see that hopelessness, that frustration. Is like no idea what to do. So we find it often that people are in this really hopeless situations. They feel that there's no hope. There are so many ways that people can experience tragedy nowadays, and very often during these times there is a deep sense of loss and feelings of hopelessness that they have no idea where to go from there on. But in this passage that we read today, you will find Jesus not telling the people, anyone, that their feelings were wrong. If you look at this passage very well, you won't see Jesus telling them, you're doing wrong or you're feeling the wrong way. As a matter of fact, the passage actually says Jesus wept with them. He wept with them. Now, in that sad situation, he did not rebuke them for their lack of faith or for not believing in him or telling them they should not act the way they had. He just, because of the sadness, and he also felt, and Lazarus was the personal friend of him, he wept with them. But the first thing I want you to know this morning is this: Jesus knows what we are going through. I think we cannot read this passage and not come to this first conclusion to understand that Jesus understands our feelings in our times when we are hopeless and we feel sad. He even felt sad himself. He wept about Lazarus because he was a close friend. But let's look at what Jesus tells Martha in this time of sorrow. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And that's a very positive statement. And in her time of sadness, Jesus tells her that there is hope. He tells her, "Your brother will rise again." And I think her immediate reply to Jesus, maybe she did not understand Jesus exactly what he was trying to tell her. Or maybe she tried to make sense of what he tried to say to her. Because her reply was, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last days." She thought that he was implying that it would be in the last days. See, her answer portrays a partial understanding of what Jesus was, and having not only being a Jewish but also a disciple of Jesus, she most certainly must have heard him a couple of times telling about people rising from the dead. As a matter of fact, we see in John chapter 5 and chapter 6, Jesus telling people about the resurrection of the dead in the last days, and Jesus wasn't silent about that. So people must have heard by that time Jesus speaking about the resurrection of the dead. And that is probably what Martha had in mind when Jesus said that. It's like thinking about the resurrection of the dead in the last days. Yet raising a brother from the dead after 4 days in the grave, I do not think she really thought about that at that specific moment. I think that came to her mind. So she answered probably the best possible way that she could. So the second important thing I want you to know this morning is the hope that Jesus is extending to you is more than you can fathom. In that hopeless situation, in the situation where there's total sadness, where you think it's lost, everything is lost, Jesus tells Martha, "Your brother will rise again." So the hope that Jesus brings us in our times of sorrow, in the times of difficulty, I think is sometimes even more than we can fathom, because Martha couldn't understand what he was telling her. I don't think we can sometimes understand what Jesus is really extending to us, the hope that he is extending to us when he tells us he will rise again or your situation will change again. So the hope that there is in him is more than we can fathom. See, our understanding of the outcome of our situation is limited to our understanding. Like Martha and Maria and all the people, they were of the same thought. They were thinking, had Jesus just come a little bit earlier, before Lazarus had died, he could have kept him from dying. See, that was, like I said, it was a logical way of thinking, because that's probably what they saw him doing many times, healing many people. They saw Jesus healing many people. The disciples see Jesus healing many people. Even a guy who was blind from childhood, a man lying next to a pool, crippled. And they saw him done it many times. So they knew he could heal a person. They knew they could heal Lazarus while he was sick. But after 4 days in the grave, I don't think that even came close to their understanding. And then the answer that Jesus gave Martha shows us once again that Jesus wants us to look at him. Remember, I've said this in the previous sermons all about when meetings with Jesus. I spoke about Jesus trying in our times of sorrow, in our times of pain, in our times of sickness. Jesus wants us to focus on him. He wants us to look at him. And that's important because he is the only one that can change the situation that we are in. See, in the previous meetings, Jesus, like I've said, Jesus wants us to focus, people to focus on him and not on their situation. Not look at the situation. Look at what Jesus tells her. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. He says he wants her, he wants Martha to focus on him, Maria to focus on him. The one who believes in me, even though they die, and whoever lives by living in me will never die. Do you believe this? You see, he wants her to not think about what happened. He wants her to focus. He wants them to focus on him as the one who can do something about the situation. It's in the times when death has robbed them of their beloved brother. Jesus is telling them that he is the resurrection and the life. And he's the only one in the hope that can bring hope in a situation where everything seems totally hopeless. So Jesus asks her, do you believe this? I think it's a good question in a situation like that. Do you really believe this? And that's a question we can ask ourselves as well when we are in real trouble or when we are in our hopeless situations, when we feel distorted and hopeless. Question is, do we really believe that Jesus is the hope in that specific situation in our lives? In the encyclopedia of 7,700 illustrations, I found the following story. See, on Sunday evening, it's a story in the encyclopedia. On Sunday evening, in his own church, Dr. Hall was delivering a written sermon on temptation. And it's like he was preaching at that point. And suddenly, during this sermon, in his usual style, he felt he's being too argumentative for many of the people. He felt the way he is addressing them was a little bit different. He should address them different than he was doing it. So he paused. He looked away of his manuscript. He just left it alone for a moment. And approaching and appealing with a loud voice to the more distant audience, looking more at the back, probably a big auditorium. He just like with a loud voice, just looked at the back, and he said the following words. He said, perhaps among those pressing in at the door, there may be someone so miserable as to think throwing himself over yonder bridge, saying, it is too late to tell me not to enter into temptation. I have done it. I am in it. There's no hope for me. Stop. There is hope. He's portraying the words of someone that perhaps think that everything is lost. And he says to that person looking there at the back, says, stop, there is hope. If you're thinking of throwing yourself off the bridge, don't do it. There is hope. He says, Christ died for thee. He will forgive. He will save even thee. And those were his words. And he had no idea why he did such an act, just felt by the Holy Spirit he had to do that. And after a few weeks afterwards, one of the members of his church told him that he had called to see a woman who had made up her mind to throw herself off the bridge. On a Sunday evening, but she thought it was still too light outside and the policeman might see her and stop her. So in order to wait for darkness, she went into a specific church and stood in the crowd inside, in the crowded door inside the church. And standing there, it seemed as if Dr. Hall at that moment called her directly to stop and come to Christ. So she went back home and prayed. And from then on, she became a true and happy Christian. It's a story that's been told as and I believe it's the truth because it's in this story in this from a specific doctor in this encyclopedia. And the thing is, if you want to know, the third thing I want you to know this evening is Jesus is the hope. Jesus is the hope. I want to ask you the same question that Jesus asked Martha is, do you really believe this? Do you really believe this? See, in our times of troubles, in our times of dismay, in our times when there is death, Jesus said to them, your brother will rise again. He is the hope. He says, look at me. I am the resurrection and the life. And the same applies for our lives. The same exactly thing applies for our lives. And Jesus is asking us, do we believe this? See, for Jesus, it is never too late. Never too late. Martha, from Martha and Maria's point of view, it may seem as if Jesus arrived too late and all hope is gone. But let's keep on reading. Let's read from verse 38 and see. Jesus once more deeply moved. He was moved. He felt the sadness as well. Came to the tomb. There was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, Martha said, the sister of the dead man. By this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always heard me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. See, this is what hopes look like. This is exactly the outcome of hope. When we put our faith in Jesus in the darkest of our hours, in sorrows and despairs and in fear that often comes over our lives, even death has no hold on us. 4 days after the funeral, 4 days this man was in the grave, and Jesus is about to show the people what hope looks like. So he tells them, take away the stone. And notice Martha telling Jesus, said, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. They are concerned. It says, it's like 4 days too late. This guy is like. But Jesus said to him, did I not tell you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? For Jesus, it's never too late. Our situation may be a stinking situation, if I can use that analogy. It's like this situation is past death already. Man, this is like, the situation reeks. And Jesus said, take away that stone. Didn't I tell you if you believe? Friends, this is such a beautiful story. What do you believe? What do you believe? Do you really believe that Jesus can really turn your situation around? I wasn't going to preach too long today, so in conclusion, I want to with the second part of Jesus' words to Martha early on. Jesus told Martha, whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Remember, he said to her, whoever believes in me will never die. The book of John, a bit further on in chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The Bible is very clear that we don't have, that we only have one life to live here on earth. Only one life to live here on earth. And after this physical death, we will all die on earth. Our belief in Jesus, either for or against him, will determine whether we will be with God in heaven or not. See, Jesus is our only hope in the present life, but also our only hope in the future life as well. He's our only hope in life and in death. So I want to leave you with the following questions for reflection. So do you believe that Jesus knows what you are going through? Do you know do you know that the hope Jesus is extending to you is more than you can fathom? Understand. Do you know that Jesus himself is the hope? He is the epitome of hope, the one who is hope himself. And do you believe that Jesus is the only way to God in heaven? I think these are good questions for reflection. Maybe you can think about them again this week as we reflect on every sermon, hopefully during the week as well. But this is like I said, this is a story of not only hope, this is a story of future hope as well. It's a story that speaks about not only death, but speaks about life. And not only life here on earth, but it speaks about life eternal with God in heaven one day, if we truly believe in him. Amen.